Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion on making supply chain more sustainable, how to. I am Umayma Medwer from B2G Consulting, and I am very honored to be moderating this session and to be joined by our esteemed panelists and speakers today, who are experts in the field of sustainability and supply chain management. So today we have the pleasure of hosting a panel of distinguished experts in the field of supply chain sustainability. Our three speakers are leaders in their respective industries and have been instrumental in driving positive change in the world of sustainable supply chain management. So first, let me introduce them. First, we have Sherry Heinisch, also known as a supply chain queen, a sustainable strategist, a speaker, and advisor, and the founder of Supply Chain Revolution, a community of over 20,000 members that shares knowledge and best practices related to sustainable supply chain management. She is a thought leader and influencer in the field of supply chain sustainability and has been recognized as a pro to know by Supply and Demand Chain Executive for 4 consecutive years. And People Choice 2020 and Social Media Influencer 2021 at the global Women's Supply Chain Leaders. So thank you for joining us today, Sherry. It's a pleasure to have you again this year with us.
Thank you. I'm so supportive of everything that B2G is doing. And of course, I'm a fan of Frederic as well. So it's a pleasure to join.
Thank you, Sherry. Second, we have Magali Anderson, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Lafarge Holcim, a leading global construction materials and solutions company. In her role, she leads the company's efforts to achieve sustainable development and ensures that sustainability is fully integrated into the company's strategy, operations, and culture. Magali has over 20 years of experience in sustainability and environmental management. Magali is also a respected thought leader and speaker on sustainability and has been recognized for her contributions in the field by many organizations. And she is also on the advisory board of Business for Nature, World Green Building Council, and the MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium. So thank you for joining us today, Magali. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to be on the panel with some good friends.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Farzana Shubarno, a global supply chain executive with the multi-regional experience in leading end-to-end supply chain operations along with strategic transformation, leading towards strong term results. She has over 2 decades of extensive expertise, and her core competencies include this supply chain and procurement excellence, digital transformation, sustainable operation, and merger and acquisitions. Farzana is well recognized in the industry through her public speaking and keynote speaking engagements across numerous digital and premise supply chain and procurement global events. So thank you, thank you, Farzana, for being here today with us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real honor to be with Magali and Sherry in the same panel. Thank you.
Perfect. So everyone, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists today. And we are very excited to hear about your experiences and insights on this critical topic. So as we all know, sustainability has become an increasingly important issue in recent years, and it's no different in the supply chain industry. In this session, we'll be exploring the challenges and opportunities of making supply chains more sustainable and discussing some of the best practices that companies can adopt to reduce their environmental impact while also improving their bottom line. So let's dive right into the discussion. Sustainable supply chain practices have become a top priority for many companies. So with that in mind, my first question is for Sherry. Sherry, you have been a vocal advocate for sustainability and supply chain management for years. So in your opinion, what are some specific strategies that companies can implement to make their supply chain more sustainable?
Sure. So I think I'd like to start out with an example of a continuum. So if you imagine either someone is starting their journey or maybe they're a bit more mature. Typically, when we talk about sustainable supply chain, one of the very first steps is understanding your materiality. And some of the existing supply chain organizations tend to focus on due diligence and compliance. So you might have ESG reporting, for example, and that baseline visualization that really puts you at the lower end of the continuum. So think about it from left to right. You're starting at square one. And as you move across the continuum in more mature organizations, and some of this we already do when we think about optimization and you think about material efficiency, operational excellence, maybe even looking at responsible sourcing through the lens of human rights due diligence and social risk mitigation. That's typically where organizations fall in the optimization category. Data analytics are very prevalent. What I like to really lean into as we continue to move toward the right-hand portion of this continuum would be choice. So due diligence and choice are really the two key factors that drive trust and transformation in a system. And as you move beyond optimization, you get really into like business transformation, experience journeys, collaborating across a global network, and what I like to refer to as the human side of transformation. How do you help human beings make more responsible, informed, and better decisions? And at any point in this continuum, you can sort of insert innovation. So this could be information that's related specifically to non-financial performance indicators or ESG performance. You can insert disruptive innovation around circularity, circular thinking, circular economy, and then also end-to-end communication. And that's really where experience journeys come to life. Think about responsible sourcing or source to pay, integrated business process where you can connect the first kilometer of a supply chain, so tier 5 supplier, tier 4 supplier, with the consumer at the shelf, at the point of sale. So these are all examples of what a continuum might look like. When we get into specific strategies, depending on the maturity of the company, the ambition, the outcomes thereafter, that's really where you get very sector or industry specific. I can give you a few examples that I think a lot of folks right now are talking about. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit would be, optimization in transportation, reducing waste streams in general, but specifically, you look at energy, water, material, packaging. One of the biggest opportunities is definitely the use of renewable energy. And I think that some of the panelists are probably going to share a point of view around that, but also thinking about, how you bring others along with you, like what systems change are you after? And most importantly, collaboration with suppliers, trading partners, customers, with your industry cohort. So thinking about how an organization, a supply chain organization, can collaborate across business units within their own four walls and then across their global network for real impactful change. That was a long answer.
Thank you, Sherry. So building on that, Farzana, how can companies effectively measure and track the sustainability of their supply chain, in your opinion? And if you have anything to add about what Sherry said.
No, very insightful and very comprehensive answer by Sherry. So I just like to add 2 points and more like emphasize. Collaboration is really, really key because the journey has to be taken together. And so understanding that network and understanding the whole ecosystem is very important. Who, where, how, when is impacted and contributing into our sustainability impact is very important. The second thing I like to emphasize is before we get into measurement, we really need to understand where and how we make the biggest impact. I give you very quick examples. If you are into consumer products, let's say consumer care, probably the biggest impact we as a supply chain industry making is in packaging. If we are into food and ingredients, probably we are looking into water, agro, renewable and let's say also regenerative agriculture. So understanding out of the ESG in a circle, where we make the biggest impact and contribution would be also very important. And then we say, okay, these are the biggest and most important areas or the scopes that we contribute, we impact. Let's measure our baseline and let's measure our performance. Now, Sherry said a very, very important thing. Where are we in that journey? So when it comes to measurement, we really need to understand, are we starting at the beginning or are we already in that journey? Measuring in a really at a granular level to say from farmer to processor to aggregator to manufacturer to transportation, it might be a really big undertaking. So understanding where our carbon footprint is biggest, understanding where our agro impact is biggest, understanding where we are generating waste, and bringing these up into the measurements is also helpful. So essentially what we see and what we try to do in Unilever is essentially look into where our biggest impact is, which process stream or which work stream in our journey is contributing the largest, and take them to measure and improve over time.
Thank you, Farzana. Magali, as a leader in sustainability and operations, could you share with us some best practices for managing and reducing the environmental impacts of logistics and transportation in the supply chain?
Sure. Let me just give you a very quick overview first. So, we are part with Holcim of what is so-called hard-to-abate sector, which means that majority of our emissions come from scope 1 and 2, which is actually relatively comfortable compared to a lot of the sectors. So usually in our sectors, people don't look at the supply chain. However, even though 1 and 2 is very big, still represent more than 20%, and that's 30 million tons of CO2. So that's when, with Holcim, we decided that we should tackle scope 3, even though no one was asking us, since SBTi has been asking us to do it. So we were a bit front runner, and that was good. And the way we did it, I would say that very quickly, just to add, because what was said before me was already excellent, but I just wanted to add one practice that we used is we launched a program with a supply chain organization, and because I really got super excited, and we called it, sorry, losing my English here, sustainable competitiveness. And that got the entire supply chain organization very engaged, because instead of just explaining what was a CO2 challenge, we really took the angle of showing how more competitive we could become by being more sustainable in our supply chain. And that was great. And the other thing maybe that I don't think it has been mentioned. For me, when I talk about making my supply chain more sustainable, of course, the scope 3 CO2 and so on is very important. But we are working in a lot of geographies where there could be issues in the supply chain. And there's two things that we also have added to our charter, which one was doing the right thing doing things right, which is really the due diligence, the compliance, etc., making sure, I don't know, you don't have any child labor in your supply chain, for example. We are in some countries where it can happen, but also doing the right thing. And how do you make sure that the majority of your supply chain is local? How do you bring value to that local supply chain, etc., etc.? And now to really answer your question, because I went a little bit around before, as was rightly mentioned just before by Farzana, I think understanding your impact is super important. And again, we are lucky because, like I said, the scope 3 is only quote unquote 20% of our CO2, but also scope 3 is we have 3 categories that makes the majority or 75% of our scope 3. And one of them is transportation. We actually do we do about 2 billion kilometers every year, transporting our product or raw material or products. And it's huge. Sometimes I like to say we are a logistic company that makes cement sometimes when they have time, or building material, but it's a huge number. I heard one day UPS is around 3 billion. So you see 2 billion compared to UPS 3 billion, that gives an idea of how big we are. So we understood very quickly that that was really something we had to tackle. And we created, it was also for health and safety purpose, we created something called TAC, Transportation Analytics Center, where we now have about 70–80% of the kilometers we make connected to that platform via something called internal vehicle monitoring system, which is kind of black box that you put inside the truck. And we did that considering that 95% of our transportation is via third parties. It's not our own trucks. So it was really a huge collaborative work with all our transporters, explaining to them why they should invest in that technology. And some of them, for example, we showed them how they could get a lower insurance premium because they could demonstrate that they were going to lower the number of incidents they had thanks to that technology. And with all this connected, once you have that data, you can do a transportation management system, which is incredible, and you know exactly how much CO2 you spend, but then you can really start leveraging all your transportation network, you know, trucks going full and coming back full instead of coming back empty, etc., etc. There's many super supply chain experts here that understand that very well. I don't need to go into details, but that's to answer your question. We went with the challenge of connecting the equivalent of 2 billion kilometers of trucks into this analytic center, and it's been really super useful to reduce one of our main scope 3 target we have, which is reduce the CO2 per ton of product transported.
That's huge. Thank you very much, Magali, for your insights. And Sherry, I'll get back to you. So how can companies actually ensure that their sustainability efforts in the supply chain align with their overall corporate sustainability goals?
Yeah, I think that this is pretty tough. And there are a couple overarching themes that I just want to unpack. The first is that this isn't something that any one organization, provider, vendor, consulting house, technology provider can solve for an organization. And if anyone tells you that, they're likely lying. It is hard. I think that that's where a lot of the intention and purpose-driven leadership can really be helpful. I think both of the colleagues on the panel have mentioned impact, and that this is just as much about, you know, sustainable development, business transformation, as it is transforming the lives of people. So really understanding that you have to put empathy and human beings at the center of a lot of your ambition in transformational sustainability is really key. And that is how you partner, and choice matters. Right now, when we think about the two biggest imperatives facing business and humanity, it's climate change and social inequities. And this is about redefining what great looks like. And that's a real sea change, moving away from the traditional financial performance indicators to value-driven performance and impact, or total economic impact, social ROI, a lot of these emerging ways of measuring an organization's success and industry success. To answer your question specifically, I think there are a couple things I want to pull on. One is scope 3 emissions. So Magali mentioned that in her industry, built environment, construction materials, the most material transformation in greenhouse gas emissions reduction would really be centered on scope 1 and scope 2. And that's why you always start with, you know, defining your purpose, and then really understanding double materiality. For folks like myself, where I play mainly in consumer, and then also Farzana in CPG, I think scope 3 emissions are a very wicked opportunity. So you think about all of the indirect GHG impacts that can result from things that are really outside of an organization's boundaries. And there are several categories that are really hard to wrap your arms around just as baseline visualization, because we lack first-party signals or source signals, primary data signals. And there are a couple of things that companies can focus on. One is, you have really complex supply chains by design, and every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So when you think about, how can we really make the biggest impact? I think you need to rethink a lot of your integrated business processes related to sourcing, related to network optimization, because you bake in inherent difficulty to actually trace emissions back to their source. It's also tied to a lot of the buzzwords that we hear a lot about: transparency, traceability or provenance, visibility. All of these things make it really challenging to just get like baseline emissions data from suppliers or from logistics providers, or even using more exponential tech in your manufacturing and production processes end to end. And then think about the consumer. Are you designing your products for modularity or circularity? Like, how does it come back into a reverse supply chain so you're getting as much value at the material level as possible, and you're not, 9% of materials are actually circular. So we have a huge opportunity. 91% of things end up in a landfill or completely wasted. So rethinking complexity. I think the other thing, and again, it's not just about data. I hate when people say that sustainability is a data management problem, because the digital divide is real. Like, folks don't have access to technology, especially just coming back from COP27 in November in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think you really see, especially in the global South, data availability and quality is really important, but there are so many other things. You just can't look at emissions data. There are other areas of opportunity where really STEM education and digital upskilling can be really powerful, so people see how their actions are specifically connected to, for example, Scope 3 emissions reporting. So data availability and quality. I think that when you talk about data being incomplete, or maybe there's a varying level of quality, it makes it, again, difficult to accurately track, set science-based reduction targets. Also, there's a lack of standards and guidance. Oftentimes, depending on where you are in the world, you can have different standardized methods for measuring and reporting. And also, folks just don't know, like, the further back you get in your supply chain, it can become a web of assumptions, especially with a lot of the self-certification that happens. It's not dynamic, it's static, it's point in time, and responsible sourcing specifically. I think the last point is just, the cost associated. It can be expensive, and you really have to look at what is most value add. And I think that's where materiality can really help an organization focus. And then you have a limited influence. So really think about, especially in Scope 3, these are things that are beyond a company's direct control. So you really have to be clear on what you are most able to influence. And it might actually be for the benefit of your industry or sector. It might not necessarily be what's most beneficial to your organization specifically. And those are just a few key points.
Thank you, Sherry. And Magali, in your opinion, what role do government policies and regulations play in promoting sustainable supply chain practices?
Well, first of all, it plays a big role, but before I even go there, I would say, let's not take that as an excuse not to act. Sometimes I hear, if there was such policies, we could be much faster, we could do this. Now, we can do a huge amount, even without the right framework, the right policy, etc. So I just want to say that before I say which role they play, because I just have the impression that some companies or individuals just look for excuses. It's a bit easy to say someone else's responsibility, so I don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, well, the first one is public procurement. In our case, I would say about 30% of our product is bought by public procurement because we sell a lot of building material which are used to develop infrastructures. And infrastructures, by definition, is public procurement. And this is something that you could really, if I had a magic stick, I would get tomorrow morning, every single public procurement, putting some strict rules in terms of sustainability in the supply chain. For example, if it comes to carbon emission, you could impose tomorrow morning that every intensive type of material should come up with an EPD, environmental product declaration, which looks at the total life cycle of the CO2 of that product, and put a certain incentive considering that, you know, the lower CO2. It would not necessarily cost a lot of money, but it would be extremely effective. If you think of, I was talking about infrastructure, if you think of a building, let's say a hospital, the cost of the concrete to make that hospital is about 5%. So even if they say, well, we are ready to pay 10% more for a concrete that would be not completely decarbonized, it doesn't exist yet. Well, it exists if we offset, but I'm against offsetting. So for a concrete that would be, let's say, 50% decarbonized, you know, the total overall impact is 0.5% on the overall cost. So it's very insignificant. And the concrete itself represents usually about 30–40% of the CO2 of that building. So it would be extremely effective and very small. The other example I would give is about norms and standards. I think we are in a world now where innovation goes faster than norms. And norms are extremely important. And sometimes, you know, some people contact me and say, oh, there is this new product. We can build with it super low carbon or no carbon at all. Da, 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 da. And then you look at it and you can't norm it because it just doesn't follow any of the rules. And I don't think anyone wants to be in a house that's going to collapse on their head at the first rain or the first whatever, right? But they need to evolve fast. So I'll give you an example here. You know, Sherry mentioned circularity. Circularity is extremely important, and particularly in the construction business. So we have, when a building is, once you have tried to extend its life as much as possible by renovating, etc., reach an end of life, put it down, you can bring the concrete, use those fines straight back into the cement. I mean, that's incredible, right? So if you put 20% of those fines in the cement, that's 20% less CO2 immediately. And we have one product and we can only put 20% and we can only do it in Switzerland because that's the only country in the world where the norms allows it. And I don't think Switzerland can be suspected of allowing a product that will not be super strong with the right performance, etc. So we've been working a lot with the EU, and end of last year, this norm was now expanded to all EU countries. So now we are working country by country to get the local norms. The fact that you approved it doesn't still means you need to go. So that's, again, an incredible example where I've been selling for 4 years this very circular cement, and I could put much more fines in it if the norms allowed me, but at least 20 is a good start. And I could tomorrow morning sell it all across the world, but I can't because the norm doesn't allow me. So very useful, but you should not, to conclude, very useful, but it should not stop you from acting today.
Thank you, Magali. And Farzana, you think that technology such as IoT or AI, can it be utilized to improve the sustainability of supply chain?
For sure. But before we get to the utilization of technology to understand and improve the traceability and visibility of our supply chain and sustainability impacts of supply chain, we first really need to get the transformation in the mindset of the people. When you install a technology, why and how and what impact does it have? These communication and these understanding among people is very, very important. And when I say people, means not only our teams internal, but also teams external. So yes, technology, incubation, implementation, and that awareness and understanding is very, very helpful for sustainability improvement. But before that, we really need to make sure our teams across the value chain, internal and external, are fully aware and understand why we are doing, how does it impact us, and how would it improve our operation, and how where we should use it and where we shouldn't use it. There are technologies which are proven being successful, and there are technologies who are in the development of its life cycle and product cycle. So we have to be very mindful about using the right technology, because sometimes when we bring in the wrong technology, it can also divert us into a wrong decision based on the information we get. So we have to be mindful what we use, how we use, and get our teams very well aware and prepared for it.
Thank you, Farzana. Sherry, what role do industry organizations and certifications play in promoting sustainable supply chain practices, in your opinion?
This is a great question, and I'm just coming off as an executive delegate for WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Say that 3 times. I think that, again, to double click on what Magali provided, the guidelines, the standards, a lot of the certifications, it really hardens what environmental and socially responsible business practices look like within a supply chain. I think it provides access. Typically, there are learning pathways. There are many examples where I play, again, in consumer, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. I know there's been some kickback on the Higg Index, but when you think about the power of an industry really bringing all parties together, it lowers the cost of entry into what transformational sustainability looks like. So the industry collectively benefits from these people coming together on their own. And that's very similar to some of the work done at WBCSD, for example, through the PACT Coalition in standardizing emissions reporting. The other thing I mentioned earlier around like education, training, certifications specifically tied to sustainable supply chain really help suppliers. And I think, starting with upstream thinking is one of the things that I've advocated about, whether it's product design, really looking at scalable LCAs at the BOM level, and also supplier education and leveraging diverse supplier, specifically stateside. This is something that's really, really important. So you have, I'll give you an example. Forest Stewardship Council provides education to forest managers, to collective stakeholders that really maybe they didn't know that information was accessible and available. And at the end of the day, all of this comes together to help human beings make better, more responsible decisions. There are other things that you can do when you step back, just not certifications, but what do the organizations provide? I think I don't like to heavily lean on audits and assessments and the carrot or the stick. I love what Magali said around incentivizing the right performance and subsidies and tax credits. And I think that's been an aha moment for me as a Fortune 500 consultant, because especially when you get into sustainable or regenerative agriculture, you have a different incentive for a farmer than a manufacturer. There's a phrase that stuck with me from COP27. I kicked off Africa COP, and the president of Zimbabwe told me when we were talking about the ambition of 100 million EVs in Africa for the next few years, from 6 to 7 million right now, current state. And he said something very simply, a buffalo in a car will get you to where you're going, but how you incentivize each of them to move looks very differently. And I think that is part of the opportunity when you think about industry, people collectively coming together in some organized way. How do you move for the greater good? Providing and facilitating training, certification is a piece of it, but I think without the real behavior change and systems change, you're not going to actually move forward at pace and scale that we need by 2030. I hope I answered your question.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sherry. And so actually this one will be my last question, and it is directed to all of you. So in conclusion, we've discussed various ways that companies can make their supply chains more sustainable. But what do you think are some key takeaways that companies should keep in mind as they communicate and engage with customers about their sustainable supply chain efforts? So let's start with you, Sherry.
So communicate the truth, not to be too forward and provocative, but actually do what you say you do. I think that there is a lot of green hushing going on. We've already heard about greenwashing, but you will be called out. I think that people are more aware. People will hold you accountable. And when you develop a sustainability communication strategy, make sure that you not only align with your overall brand messaging and you focus on the most relevant and impactful initiatives in your supply chain or more broadly in your organization's purpose, but be able to credibly demonstrate and prove that. I think that this is where we talked a little bit about technology. I think someone mentioned IoT, ESG reporting. This is where that really it comes into play. It's not the end all be all, but you have to be able to demonstrate through transparency, through clear messaging that you are disclosing actively, you're proactively addressing opportunities within your supply chain using relevant data and details. And I think you have to highlight the good. I mean, this is really hard, and celebrate the wins. Definitely bring everyone along in your journey with you, sharing stories, openly sharing use cases and leveraging them. We talked about industry collaboration with your peers so you can bring others along with you. And lastly, most importantly, I really love the idea of providing educational resources. Bring consumers along with you, show how their individual decision and transaction is connected to something much larger than themselves, because every person has to participate in a sustainable supply chain, and so much happens in the supply chain. So if you can provide this sort of awareness, leaning on behavioral economics, I think that's also another lever that companies can use in their communication strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, Sherry. And Farzana, what do you think?
Yeah, so Sherry covered almost most of it. One thing I do want to add is corporations, organizations don't need to be perfect to communicate their commitment, their actions to consumers. So wherever we are in the journey, let's first understand where we are. Let's first have a clear strategy, and let's share what we are going to do, what we are doing, and what is the impact it's making to our consumers. The consumers are very, very smart, aware, engaged in today's world. Hiding it's not going to help. Misinforming it's going to hurt a lot. So expressing the intent, commitment, showing some actions, and showing that we started the journey or we are improving little by little is very important. So no matter where we are in this journey, let's connect, communicate what we are doing and how it's improving. The other thing and the last thing I'll say is sharing the whole story is important, not only just our organization, but also everybody in the ecosystem, how it's impacting, whether it's supplier, channel partner, distributor, retailer. It's important to show that we are doing good. And this intent, this commitment needs to be an organizational and business commitment, not only a profit-oriented commitment. So consumer will see right through us if we are trying to, let's say, do a pricing advantage based on sustainability. So it is very important that we truly from our heart do this for the goodness and for the right intent, and make it as part of our organizational agenda, mission, vision, and not really make it an ambition or a kind of a strategy to really impact our top line. So those three things I think is very important.
Thank you, Farzana. And Magali, what do you think?
Well, I could not agree more with what was said before, and particularly when Sherry talked about, greenwashing, greenhushing, etc. One of the things I'm the most proud of is 2 years, we came out with our net zero commitment with SBTi, etc., a bit more than 2 years ago. And I'm sure when we came out with that, considering who we are, considering the construction industry, the construction sector, a lot of people put their magnifying glasses on and scrutinize everything we said and continue to do so. But we've never been accused of greenwashing. And this is for me absolutely fundamental. When you claim a certain sustainability of your product, or when you claim a certain sustainability of your roadmap, it has to be absolutely 100% transparent and robust. And since we also put our climate transition to the vote of the shareholder to show how transparent we were. And it's funny because we decided to launch almost 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago now, our low carbon concrete brand. And when we did it, and again with transparent criteria, explaining what it meant, etc., no offset. And when we launched it, many people told us there is no market for it. There's no market for low carbon concrete. No one wants to pay for it. No one wants it. But we decided to go for it. So we decided to be bold. And we launched it 2 years later. We have it in 30 markets. And it represented, so I can say that because the numbers became public today, it represented 14% of our total sales of concrete. How many companies would love to launch a product which in 2 years reached 14% of their sales? I think it's an incredible success. Thank you, Sherry, for applauding. And I really see, and I think I would say be bold. I think all those market studies that people do everywhere, it's a bit like the norms. They don't go as fast as change of mindset. So just chicken and egg can make you waste a huge amount of time. And that's why we decided we just go for it and we go bold, big time, all markets. And it's been a super success. So I think it's all about collaboration, transparency, and of course, a lot of communication so that people know that it exists. It's no point to put a super product on the market if you don't do the right communication about it. And both your supply chain and your consumers will really follow you big time. I have no doubt about that.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, I have goosebumps from listening to that. I think this is a key takeaway, that it's not just disruptive thinking, it's disruptive leadership, and that we need the right leaders, because you can have the best ideas, but as Magali just unpacked, you really have to be bold and you really have to push and believe. And this is our opportunity. I mean, we're literally in the midst of multiple emergencies, and it might not feel like that, but we truly are when we look at climate change and biodiversity collapse, the digital divide, a lot of the financial divides that happen because of social inequities. We have to rise to the occasion, and it's going to take bold leaders to actually realize the 2030 vision. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for your insights. It was a really insightful discussion. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Magali. Thank you, Farzana, for joining me today and joining us today at this event. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's clear that making supply chains more sustainable is not only important for the environment, but also for the long-term success of businesses. So as we wrap up the discussion, I encourage all of us to continue this conversation and take action to implement sustainable practices in our own organizations, whether it's reducing waste, increasing the use of renewable energy sources, or investing in sustainable materials. There are ways that can make a positive impact. So once again, thank you for joining us today, for your insight and everything. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And I hope you found this discussion informative and thought-provoking. So thank you, everyone. Do not hesitate to drop your questions. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Have a
Thank
great day. Creatively. Thank
Great
you.
to see you all. Thank you.